Welcome back, guys. In the previous lesson, we've learned about Dave. Yeah, we can say that actually. So we've learned about the transform component and the sprite render component. So we can actually open our image right here or file, and I don't know if you want, we can color this in red or green because yeah, we've done that. Perfect. So now we need to control Dave. So let's go back to Unity. And as we've said in the previous lesson, one of the ways we can use to move Dave, like so, is to access the transform component and change its position along the X and Y axis. Okay? So let's just reset this. But there is another way we can use, because moving Dave, we're using the transform here, can and will cause issues when we'll work with detection. Because ideally, later on, we will have an arena. Remember? And inside of our arena will be Dave. And Dave needs to collide with the walls of the arena. So if he needs to collide, we will need a collider, right? But this is not the first thing we want to use here. Another way to move an object in Unity is by using physics. So what we are going to do is add a new component, go under the Physics 2D tab, and select Rigid Body 2D right here at the bottom. What you can do is also write Rigid Body 2D. Perfect. Here is our, oh, come on, where is it? Control Z, no, Control Shift Z, it's not working. Anyway, I'm going to add it again. So Rigid Body 2D, boom, like so. So if we hit play to start our game, I think Dave will fall. And Dave is falling. He is falling because we have added a Rigid Body 2D component to it. And that component applies physics to any object that has it as a component. But what we can do is prevent Dave from falling. So let's set the gravity scale to 0. If we now hit play again, he should not fall. And he's not falling indeed. Perfect. Nothing. Okay, cool. Then we don't want Dave to rotate along or around the Z-axis, like so. It's not something that we want. Or at least we don't want to rotate it after colliding a wall or an enemy. So what we can do is expand the constraints and check freeze rotation. Now Dave won't be able to rotate. Perfect. There are more options right here, but we are going to go through them later on in the course. So now to move Dave, let's make use of the Rigid Body 2D component. For that, we are going to create our first script, the player controller, that will allow us to edit or manage Dave's velocity. All right, so let's open our Kawaii Survivor folder. Right-click and create a new folder. Let's call it Scripts. Open it, and again, right-click, create a new C# script, and let's call it Player Controller. Or you can call it Character Controller or Dave Controller or anything you want. But just make sure that you understand, or that at least it's clear for you, okay? The goal of this course is not for you to follow along and make the same things as I do. You should not copy what I do, actually. You should rename things from time to time so that you understand what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, the goal will be for you to grab a course and make your own game or games, hopefully. All right. So let's now select Dave. We can actually collapse our two components and add the player component script like so, or by looking for it in the search bar. Player controller. Perfect. We can now open it. If that's the first script you ever open in your life, congratulations. This is a big step. And this is actually the start or the beginning of an amazing journey. All right, so let me explain quickly for those of you who are new to this. At the top right here, you've got the libraries that you are using. So these ones are grayed out, so we are not using them. We can remove them, but this one is not grayed out. So if we comment it using 2 forward slashes, we are going to have an error because the monoBehavior class right here is contained inside of the Unity Engine namespace. All right, so this is a class, this is a namespace. If you want to create your own namespace, quick tip, you can write namespace blah blue and add some brackets, curly brackets actually, like so. And you've created your own namespace like so. So in another script, you can use using blah blue. Let's try here, using blah blue. Perfect, semicolon, here we go. So let's remove these because we are not going to create our own namespace yet, like so. How was it at the beginning actually? Control Z. Here we go. So we've got the name of our class player controller, and Unity has added two methods, the start method and the update method. As you can see right here, the start method is called before the first frame update, and the update method is called once per frame. So it depends on your frame rate. If you are running at 60 FPS, it's going to be called somewhere around 60 times per second. If you're running at 30 FPS, somewhere around 30 times per second. Okay? So what we are going to do first is try and grab our rigid body 2D because this is the one that contains the velocity of the player. So let's add a reference to our rigid body 2D. So public rigid body 2D, let's call it rig. You declare your variables after the class declaration, if that's an optimal way, but you can actually declare them after the methods. It's weird, it's not conventional. So yeah, the best way to declare them, it's right after your class declaration, okay? Basically, you declare your variables, then your methods, all right? So let's go back to Unity. And right away, we can spot that Unity has added a rig component. So we can grab the rig and drop it here. This is one way of doing things. But we are already doing something bad here. What is it? If you've watched the promo video of the course, you've noticed that I told you that we should not use that many public variables. Why? Because if we do so, we can imagine another script, maybe the enemy script, can access the rigid body of the player. And this is not what we want because we only want the player controller right now to be able to access it. So what we're going to do is make it private. Okay? That way we can't access it from any other script. But if we make it private, we are not able to spot it here. So this is another issue. To fix that, we are going to add an attribute. And to add an attribute, you can use brackets like so and write serialize field. By adding or using this attribute, Unity will serialize your field and display it inside of the inspector. Hooray! We fixed our issue. So the rigid body won't be accessible by other scripts, and we are still able to access it. That is so cool. Another way we could have done it, if we don't want to display the rig inside of the inspector, is to actually remove this and write rig equals get component rigid body 2D. So at start, Unity is going to go and grab the rigid body 2D attached to the player right here, and we'll then be able to use it. But if we don't have any rigid body attached, so let's remove the rigid body component here, okay, and hit play. What will happen in your opinion? Nothing, because we haven't done anything with the rig right now. But if we try and use the rig, so rig.let's say velocity, because we said that we wanted to control the velocity of the player, let's say equals vector2.right, just to go to the right. Vector2.right is actually a vector with 1 along the x-axis and 0 along the y-axis. So let's now go back to Unity, hit play, and what will happen now? Error. There is no rigid body attached to the Dave game object, but a script is trying to access it. Okay, so it's telling us that we don't have any rigid body attached to Dave, and of course we don't. So what you can do here is make sure that you have a rigid body 2D attached to Dave, or if you don't have one right here, what you can do is specify or tell Unity that if you ever add the player controller script to an object, a game object, it should automatically add a rigid body 2D. So we can tell Unity to do that using another attribute. So require component type of rigid body 2D, like so. And just like that, Unity will add a rigid body 2D whenever you add the player controller to any object. So let's remove the player controller and add it again. Just like that, Unity has automatically added a rigid body 2D, as we've said. So this is another way of doing things, and now we won't have any more errors. If we hit play, Dave should move to the right. And yep, it's also falling because we haven't disabled the gravity on the new one. And we also need to reset or freeze the rotation. So let's now hit play again. And now Dave is moving to the right. And because he has no gravity, he's actually moving straight and not stopping. That is so cool. So this is how we can use the velocity to move Dave in the next one.